In-person voting is now underway in Minnesota, South Dakota, and Virginia. Natalie Brand is in Arlington, Virginia, with more on that, plus what the Democratic and Republican presidential candidates are up to with just about 6 weeks to go until Election Day.
Vice President Kamala Harris heads to the battleground states of Georgia and Wisconsin today after getting a boost last night from Oprah Winfrey.
Please welcome Kamala Harris.
The media icon was joined by thousands of virtual guests, including a number of celebrities, as she interviewed Harris on topics including gun safety.
When you said you have guns, no, at the debate.
I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If
And I thought
somebody
that was
breaks in
powerful.
my house, they're getting shot.
Yes, I hear that. I hear that.
Probably should not have said that.
Michigan voters made up the in-person audience. Polls in the battleground state show Harris and former President Donald Trump virtually tied. Last night in Washington, Trump courted Jewish voters at two events to combat anti-Semitism.
Anybody who's Jewish and loves being Jewish and loves Israel is a fool if they vote for a Democrat.
Early voting kicked off here in Virginia today at polling sites, while in South Dakota and Minnesota you can vote early in person with absentee ballots.
It's time to get registered to vote. It's time to get your registration updated at your current address. And then it's time to make a plan to vote, to figure out if you're going to vote by mail, early in person, or on Election Day.
Benjamin Hovland chairs the nonpartisan U.S. Election Assistance Commission.
The best place to go for trusted source information is your state and local election official.
He added there is always a need for poll workers, especially ones who can provide language assistance. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Arlington, Virginia.
When asked whether there is enough election workers in this country, Hovland told CBS News that there are just a few jurisdictions that have needs, particularly in places where they're seeking partisan balance.